Hi everyone, welcome to another Phase B lecture of this self-knowledge course. Today we will explore a fascinating subject as we seek to understand what the figure known as Lucifer, the devil, and Satan truly represents. Until now, many of us have understood Lucifer in the same mistaken way we have traditionally understood God, as a being existing outside of ourselves. Today, however, we will see that just as God is our own inner being, the light within us, our inner master and guide, Lucifer is also an inner reality. He represents an aspect of our own psychology. He is the tempter, our psychological trainer, whose temptations we must constantly overcome. Each time we overcome those temptations, we develop strength, love, virtues, powers, and faculties that could not be acquired in any other way. We will also see that this force unfolds into two additional aspects, known as the devil and Satan. Understanding and overcoming these three aspects is essential for advancing on the path toward enlightenment. Much has been said about the devil, and countless books have been written on the subject, yet very few have truly explained its deeper meaning. To understand the origin of this symbol, we must look to the initiatic crypts of ancient civilizations and the sacred caves of antiquity. Throughout these lectures, we have seen that many of the allegories and characters found in the sacred scriptures represent inner realities that cannot be understood if we interpret those texts only according to their literal meaning. We have discovered that many of these figures symbolize aspects of our own being. This same principle appears consistently throughout the sacred traditions of many civilizations, including the Sumerian, Babylonian, Egyptian, Greek, Muslim, and Judeo-Christian traditions. Although the names and characters may vary from one culture to another, the same universal principles and forces are always present. For example, the Christian Trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit corresponds to Osiris, Horus, and Isis in the Egyptian mysteries, and to Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva in the Hindu tradition. Likewise, the Christic force that exists latently within every human being has been represented throughout history by the great masters who embodied that force and taught the path of Christification. Among them are Horus in Egypt, Krishna in India, Hermes Trismegistus in Greece, Buddha in Nepal, Jesus in Israel, and Quetzalcoatl in Mexico. We also find that figures such as Adam and Eve symbolize a profound event that took place during the third race that inhabited our planet, when humanity passed from an androgynous condition into beings with separate male and female sexes. The separation into opposite polarities gave rise to a third force, sexual attraction or desire. Within this force of desire, we find the symbolism of the forbidden fruit, together with the tempting serpent that persuaded humanity to eat of that fruit, representing the act of fornication. From that moment arose the legion of psychological eyes that we carry within ourselves today. Those very psychological elements become the raw material through which we can rise from our fallen condition and extract wisdom from our experiences. It is within this entire symbolism of the serpent, temptation, and the fall of humanity that we find the origin of what has come to be known as Lucifer, the devil, and Satan, whose true meaning we will seek to understand in this lecture. We know Lucifer as darkness, the opposite of light. And since God is light, Lucifer has been understood as the opposite of God. What is truly interesting, however, is to examine this duality and understand that, at its origin, both are part of the same reality. Light and shadow form a harmonious contrast whose ultimate purpose is wisdom. To understand this, we must first recognize why we, as sparks of light, emerged from the absolute and entered this cosmic manifestation. We came to acquire wisdom. A spark that remains in the absolute, without any knowledge of good and evil, is innocent, but it cannot fully comprehend the greatness of its own being. Our original limitation was innocence without wisdom, because wisdom can only be acquired through direct experience and contrast. A person who has tasted only sweetness throughout life could never know what sweetness truly is without first experiencing bitterness. Likewise, no one could recognize the highest state of bliss and fulfillment without first experiencing pain and degeneration, nor could anyone understand what it means to be a perfect multiple unity without first having been divided into an imperfect multiplicity. That is why we entered this cosmic manifestation. Our being, which is light, unfolded itself and the reflection of that intimate logos, the true and ineffable reality within us, appeared as its own shadow, existing within each one of us. Lucifer is a part of our own being. He is the reflection or shadow of our inner being, and dwells within us. This shadow or logoic reflection fulfills a specific function in the deepest levels of our consciousness. Its mission is to lead us to experience everything that is opposed to light, namely ignorance. This is because Lucifer within us is desire, and desire expresses itself through the psychological eyes that make up the ego. Lucifer's first function was to lead humanity into temptation. We find Lucifer in his aspect as the devil, represented by the tempting serpent in the Garden of Eden. Through desire, humanity entered the path of ignorance, symbolized by the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That tree represents the ego. Each spark of light that makes up the 97% of our essence became trapped within the psychological defects created through fornication. These defects are the Satans we carry within ourselves today. Lucifer inevitably unfolds into the fatal aspect of egoic multiplicity so that the light becomes imprisoned within desire. Lucifer also caused the sacred fire, our sexual energy of the Holy Spirit, to descend and become inverted. That inverted fire is the devil within us, represented by the inverted serpent known as the Kundabuffer organ. Yet Lucifer not only served as the ladder by which humanity descended, he also became the ladder by which humanity can ascend. His second function is to act as our tempter, our psychological trainer. Once we receive the knowledge of the three factors for the revolution of consciousness, we can begin to deny our desires, thereby overcoming Lucifer, eliminate the ego, thereby overcoming Satan, and transmute our sexual energy, thereby overcoming the inner devil. From that moment on, Lucifer assumes the role of psychological trainer, constantly placing before us the trials that allow us to advance along the inner path. Only by facing rigorous tests do we develop the virtues of consciousness. Just as a physical gym requires a trainer to develop strength, the psychological gymnasium of human existence requires a trainer to awaken extraordinary virtues, powers, and faculties. How could virtue arise if there were no temptation? Throughout every day, we experience thousands of desires and thousands of temptations. Hidden within each one is an opportunity to advance and to free the consciousness trapped within desire. For example, we may feel the impulse to become angry with a child who has done something we did not want. We may feel the desire to respond with harsh words or even violence. That very moment becomes the perfect psychological exercise. If we refuse to satisfy that desire, we rescue the consciousness trapped within it and allow patience and gentleness to emerge. Only through struggle, contrast, temptation, and rigorous esoteric discipline can the flowers of virtue blossom within us. Then we begin to understand that Lucifer fulfills an essential role. Without him, we could not acquire the wisdom that our being came to seek in this wheel of samsara. Lucifer never presents us with a temptation that we are incapable of overcoming because he is justice itself. This leads us to an important question: where then is Lucifer's evil? Without temptation, there is no virtue. The greater the temptation, the greater the virtue that can be developed if we are victorious. Temptation is fire. Triumph over temptation becomes light. The important thing is not to fall into temptation. Lucifer is both the ladder by which we descend and the ladder by which we ascend. Through him, we carry out the work of dissolving the ego in the laboratory of sexual alchemy. If, after receiving this knowledge, we consciously choose to give in to temptation and satisfy our egoic desires, if, knowing the power of sexual energy, we refuse to deny the desire to continue experiencing the pleasure of fornication, we will descend into increasingly terrible states. We will strengthen the Kundabuffer organ, becoming demons, black magicians, negative entities awakened in evil. On the other hand, by defeating Lucifer, by overcoming the dragon as he has been represented in many cultures, we can crystallize within ourselves the three primary forces of the universe: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, symbolized by the trident. In this way, we transform ourselves into absolute men. We must understand that everything in this dual world is polarized. In the same way, darkness, as another aspect of existence, is also polarized. Positive darkness unfolds into negative darkness. Positive darkness, or supradarkness, is the darkness of silence and the august secret of the wise. It is within that silence that we work upon ourselves, learning to keep within everything our being reveals to us, so that we may steal from darkness the light that leads to complete enlightenment. Negative darkness, or infradarkness, is the darkness of ignorance and error. We enter it every time we surrender to desire and nourish our psychological defects. That is how we descend into the deepest levels of degeneration, vice, cruelty, idolatry, sorcery, domination over others, abuse of power, and every other form of spiritual degeneration. The choice has always been and continues to be ours. Either we ascend or we descend. If we choose to ascend, we begin the inner work, a struggle that is not directed against external powers, but against ourselves, against our own devil and our own inner Satan. From those Satans, our psychological eyes, and from that devil, the inverted fire, we gradually rescue the light and the fire that Lucifer returns to us each time we overcome one of his temptations. Every temptation we refuse frees the sparks of consciousness trapped within desire. The sum of those liberated sparks gives birth to the Christ within us, who, during the work of the second mountain, through the Luciferian fire, reduces the ego to ashes. After examining all of this, we can understand that the devil is not the dark character created by the dogmatism of certain dead sects, which placed him upon a throne of ignominy to frighten the weak and keep them under control. We must free ourselves from the fanatical beliefs and concepts that have been instilled in us to keep us submissive, fearful, and easy to dominate. It is time to awaken to our own inner reality. Satan, Lucifer, and the devil are the reflection of our own inner being within ourselves and within our consciousness, here and now. The true struggle is not between good and evil. The real struggle is between knowledge and ignorance, because both good and evil belong to the realm of the ego and are the two faces of ignorance. Consciousness exists beyond the concepts of good and evil. Consciousness is righteousness, balance, light, and truth. That is the battle taking place within us from moment to moment. Let us now look at some representations of Lucifer, the devil, and Satan so that we can better understand their symbolism. The most familiar image of the devil is the red figure with a dragon's tail, animal legs, horns, a long nose, a beard, and a trident. When we interpret these symbols through the language of astral symbolism, we discover what they truly represent. The color red symbolizes sexual energy. The dragon's tail represents the kunda buffer organ created through fornication. The animal legs symbolize the loss of our true human state and our fall into the condition of rational animals as a consequence of fornication. The horns represent the wisdom of evil. The long nose symbolizes lust. The beard represents the power that the ego acquires through the spoken word by feeding upon our energy. Finally, the trident pointing downward represents the inverted trinity. Satan is nothing other than our egoic multiplicity. He is the inner legion, every one of our psychological eyes, every negative way of being that we carry within ourselves. Each of them possesses a horrifying, truly demonic appearance in the internal worlds. As long as we continue to carry them within us, they also determine our own inner appearance. If you wish to know how you truly appear internally at this very moment, ask your inner being, while standing before a mirror in the astral plane, to allow you to see yourself as you really are. You will discover that, regardless of how virtuous or good you believe yourself to be, as long as the ego remains alive within us, our inner appearance is truly horrifying. Lucifer has been represented in many cultures by the image of the dragon. This symbol originated from the gigantic flying reptiles that actually existed during the epochs of Lemuria and Atlantis. In Egypt, the sacred absolute sun was represented by Osiris, while his shadow, his reflection, his Lucifer, was symbolized by Typhon. In the Greek mysteries, the spiritual sun, the creator demiurge, was represented by Apollo, while his shadow, his Lucifer, his Satan, his divine reflection, was represented by Python. In the Apocalypse of St. John, the radiant Christic sun is symbolized by Michael, the divine warrior, while his cosmic shadow appears as the red dragon. During the Middle Ages, the Logos was represented by St. George, while his shadow was symbolized by the dragon. This symbolism teaches that overcoming the dragon, defeating the dragon, is essential for anyone who wishes to be swallowed by the serpent. Anyone who aspires to become a serpent. This means emerging victorious from every temptation presented by the dragon, eliminating the ego, dissolving every psychic aggregate that composes it, and reducing every memory of desire to cosmic dust. In this way, every true self-realized being becomes a true dragon of wisdom. In Greek mythology, Lucifer is also represented by Prometheus, the Titan who was the friend of humanity and became famous for stealing fire from the gods and giving it to mankind. For this reason, he was condemned to remain chained to the rock. This symbolism shows Lucifer as the faithful of the scales, the bearer of light and fire, who unfolds into the fatal aspect of egoic multiplicity. He remains chained to the hard rock that symbolizes sex, sacrificing himself for humanity and enduring every torment in order to provide each of us with the psychological gymnasium and the necessary experiences to extract wisdom from this wheel of existence and rise as Christs or masters. There are two trees, the tree of life, which represents the creation of the existential bodies of the being, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which represents the knowledge of the ego. Both trees share the same root, and that root is sex. For this reason, Prometheus is chained to the rock. Prometheus, or Lucifer, is responsible for educating us through sex. There, he subjects us to rigorous training through the most severe temptations, because suprasex must reach the highest levels of purification for the work of the second mountain. If we emerge victorious in the field of sex, the disintegration of the ego inevitably follows. Lucifer must make us strong. He must lead us to attain complete mastery over the sexual energy and to develop great chastity. He must educate us in the gymnasium of sexual magic and transform us into true athletes of sexual alchemy. In Greek mythology, it is Heracles, or Hercules, who represents the Christ and frees Prometheus from the rock. This symbolizes that it is the Christ who finally defeats the dragon by eliminating every psychological defect, including the causal ego. Once Lucifer has completed his work as psychological trainer, and there is no longer any temptation left to present, his mission comes to an end. He merges with the Christ and with the Holy Spirit, forming the O of the Divine Mother. Then the serpent swallows its own tail, returning once again to the original duality, but now as a perfected duality. Finally, the eagle swallows the serpent, becoming the feathered serpent, the absolute man, and returning to unity. We can now understand that the scaled one, Lucifer, the shadow of the eternal, the intimate reflection of our own divine being, ultimately returns to him, merges with him, and shines within him, because in the deepest sense, he is he. This concludes our study of this topic. These are teachings that require deep reflection, and they often challenge many of the concepts we have previously accepted. But the important thing is to reflect, ask our inner being for understanding, and investigate these things internally so that we reach our own wisdom on this and all subjects. As always, I remain available to answer any questions you may have. In the next lecture, the 20th of Phase B, we will study intuition and learn how to develop it, since it is the faculty that allows us to hear and understand the messages of our own inner being. Until next lecture.